Hello there, my name is Amanda May and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be going over all of the books that I read in 2020 and what my reading stats were. I did not start off 2020 with any sort of reading goal. I didn't expect to read hardly much at all, to be honest. This year I got back into reading. I've loved reading all my life, but circumstances like high school, college, now my job kind of got in the way and took up a bunch of my time, most of my energy. And so I didn't read very much before this year. So like I said, at the beginning of the year, I didn't have any sort of reading goal and I didn't know what BookTube was. I didn't know what Goodreads was. I was completely out of the loop. And luckily, one of my best friends turned me on to Goodreads, and being the organization junkie that I am, I loved it. I spent, I don't know how many hours that first day I downloaded the app importing my entire library, my entire history of reading into the app, and have since been using it on a daily basis. And as most of you probably know, Goodreads allows you to participate in annual reading challenges where you set a goal for yourself of how many books you want to read in that year. So about halfway through the year, I decided to go ahead and set a goal, and it was something like, I want to read 15 books this year or something like that. That was honestly a decent goal for me based on my history of being able to devote time to reading for fun. But lo and behold, I surpassed that 15 pretty quick. And I upped it to like 24, I think, and then I upped it to 32 or 36. I just kept upping it, right? I mean, I didn't really know what I was capable of before, and I kept pushing myself to read more and more. It was something that I was really enjoying doing. And so I eventually landed on 55 books as my goal. And I made it. I did. I completed 55 books this year, and I didn't even start until mid or late February. And I really didn't even pick up my pace until about halfway through the year. So I'm so proud of that 55. I really am. It's the most books I've ever read in a year by far. And it just showed me what I'm capable of. And so I'm hoping, next year with COVID maybe possibly being less of a thing, hopefully, I'm hoping I'll still be able to devote as much time to reading as I've been able to devote this year. So yeah, I read 55 books. My total page count was 23,339 pages. The shortest book I read was 11 pages, very short story, and the longest book I read was 992 pages. I'm honestly not sure the order of the books that I picked up because, again, I didn't know that Goodreads was a thing until late July. Like literally the end of July, July 31st, I think is when I joined Goodreads. So until we get to August, I'm just gonna kind of guess at the order for these books. So I think it was somewhere like mid to late February, maybe, when I picked up my first book of 2020. And that would be A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This is the Juniper Books Dust Jacket, obviously not the original Dust Jacket. This book got me back into reading. It reignited my love for reading, and I blew through this entire series. So here, I blew through this entire series: A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, and A Court of Frost and Starlight. And it was just what I needed to get out of my, I don't even know how many years reading slump. So while this isn't like my favorite series ever or anything, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I owe a lot to this series. This series is the only reason why I read as many books as I did in 2020. Okay, I don't know if I knew this, but after reading the entire A Court of Thorns and Roses series, Aquatar series, I was hungry for more Sarah J. Maas. I discovered that I liked her writing, I liked her storytelling, and lo and behold, she had a bunch of other books that are out, and so I picked up and read, oh god, the entire Throne of Glass series. I'm gonna just pick one of these right now. Okay, first book, Throne of Glass. So I would have started reading this probably in March or April, maybe? I'm not sure. I wasn't keeping track of when I read everything back then. What did you do? I think that was my dog. Weird. but I just binged the entire series. Well, I binged 1 through 7, and then I took a little break and eventually picked up Assassin's Blade later on in the year. Okay, so I think that sometime in the kind of early middle of the year, early summer, I discovered BookTube. Thank you, Elliot Brooks. And I figured out that there was going to be a Netflix TV show for the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which I hadn't heard of. Most of these books I hadn't heard of until this year. Just pretend I hadn't heard of any of these books until this year, and you're probably correct. I picked up the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I binged it, all of it. And really, I wasn't super interested in the Shadow and Bone. Well, I was interested in it, but I made myself read these so that I could read the Six of Crows duology, which really sounded super interesting to me. Ooh, these are slippery. So I went ahead and binged my way through Leigh Bardugo. I have yet to read King of Scars, which you can see right there. That'll be on a TBR pretty soon. So sometime in the middle of the year, around when I was reading Leigh Bardugo's Shadow and Bone series probably, I picked up Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. This is a Viking-inspired fantasy story. Fantasy in that it doesn't take place on our world, but I don't believe there was any magic in this. I really enjoyed it. It was something different than what I'm used to. Like I said, it wasn't magic heavy, and I don't think I've read any, or at least not many, Viking-inspired stories, so this is a nice break from your like magical witches and wizards, high fantasy type stuff. And I plan on reading the sequel, which recently came out in 2021. So the first book I read in August was actually A Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book in the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo, and I really enjoyed it. There was one thing that happened that I didn't really enjoy, one thing that happened to one of the characters that I thought was not handled so greatly. But all in all, I really enjoyed this duology. Next, I picked up Midnight Sun. Sorry, I don't have the dust jacket on it. I picked up Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I really didn't know that this book was ever a thing because I was out of the loop, I guess, but I read Twilight back in middle school and high school, and I enjoyed it. And so I just, I felt the need to read this one because guess what? I'm a completionist, as I've said before on this channel. So I read through Midnight Sun. Actually really enjoyed getting to delve into some of the thoughts of the side characters through Edward's point of view. So that was fun. Next up, I picked up The Lightning Tree by Patrick Rothfuss. This is obviously Rogues, which is a collection of short stories, but it includes The Lightning Tree by Patrick Rothfuss. And The Lightning Tree is a part of the Kingkiller Chronicles. It is a short story that follows around one of the side characters, Bast. It's kind of like a day in the life. And it was really interesting and really fun to read through and to get to know Bast a little bit better and his personality. He's a character that I find pretty intriguing, and so really enjoyed reading more about him. Also in August, I picked up Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashardust. And this is a fantasy standalone book about a girl who's poisonous to the touch. I really liked the premise, and it ended up being quite a fun story. Plus, I adore the snake on the cover. I think that is so cool. Next up, I read The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. I'll be honest, I was really drawn in by the cover of this book. I think I actually originally found out about this book because of how pretty it was and how beautiful it is underneath the dust jacket. Look at that, and it's on the back too. I love it when it's on the back too. Anyway, so if you don't know, The Wicked Deep is about a town where way back when 3 sisters were condemned for being witches and they were drowned. But every year since then, they come back for a spell, They come back for a certain amount of time, a few weeks I think, and start drowning innocent boys as revenge against the town that killed them. It was relatively spooky. I'm a wimp. It wasn't really that spooky, but doesn't take much to scare me. So it was a fun time, fun read. Still in August, next I picked up The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And this one actually did seriously freak me out. I read it in the middle of broad daylight and it still gave me the creeps. But it really stuck with me, and it's so short. It's like 20 pages long, so I would recommend this to anybody to read. It has a rather feminist message, so that's really cool. And yeah, I just recommend this to anybody. Next, I read The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. Mackesy? I'm not sure. But I absolutely adore this book. I've talked about it on my channel already. It makes a great gift, by the way, for anybody, children and adults alike. It's mostly pictures, but it takes really complex life lessons and makes them pretty simple and easy to consume, easy to understand. Hence why you can give it as a gift to anybody, no matter their age, no matter their background. Everybody should read this book. The last book that I read in August was actually A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas, which I showed you earlier. It's right there. It's the second ACOTAR book. I read both books 1 and 2 twice in 2020, so that's how I finished out August. So let's move on to September. So the first 3 books that I read in September was the Selection Trilogy by Kiera Cass. This was recommended in a podcast that I listened to called Young House Love, and the woman in the podcast who recommended it just was really excited about it, got me really hyped, and so I picked these up early in the year and just didn't get around to them until September, but it was a fun time. It was very much like watching reality TV. I felt like I was watching The Bachelor, even though I've never watched an episode of The Bachelor in my life, but I feel like reading these books would be like watching that TV show. It was very dramatic, so much drama that I was like, my heart was beating fast at points and my extremities were getting cold and I just couldn't handle the drama. But it was fun. I need to finish out the other 2 books. There's kind of a duology that goes along with this that I'll probably read pretty soon here just so that I can check it off my list. The next book that I read in September was Assassin's Blade by Sarah J Maas, which I showed you earlier. Next up for September is one of my favorite books of the year, Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I adore this book. I adore this world. I adore Laini Taylor's writing style. It's wonderful. I highly recommend that anyone pick up this book if you like high fantasy, especially if you like slightly more flowery writing style, and also young adult as opposed to adult. This is just all around a really great story with really good writing and really fun characters to follow. The next book that I finished in September was Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and I listened to the audiobooks but have since purchased the physical books because I love owning every book that I've ever read. But this was another favorite of the year for me. I absolutely adore this futuristic world. I am really confused right now. Pause. So my Alexa was playing music and I didn't tell it to. It's really creepy when you are home alone and music starts playing in another part of the house and you didn't turn on that music. Where were we? I think we were at Scythe. Scythe is great. You should read Scythe. Oh my god. The next book that I read was actually an ebook, and I haven't purchased the hard copy yet, but it was How Old Holly Came to Be by Patrick Rothfuss. It was the shortest book that I read this year at 11 pages long. It technically takes place in the Kingkiller Chronicle world, but it's a little more abstract and it's sort of weird. I think Patrick Rothfuss was experimenting a little bit with his writing style, and if I remember correctly, he wrote this in like one sitting, or at least in very few sittings, which, if you know much about Patrick Rothfuss, is saying a lot because he goes through usually hundreds of drafts before publishing a story. So it was interesting, it was different. I personally really appreciated just getting a small little glimpse of some other part of the world. I think some other time in the world. It wasn't entirely clear, but I liked it. I just feel the need to read everything in the Kingkiller, am I saying that? Have I been saying that wrong? In the Kingkiller Chronicles world. If it's in the Kingkiller Chronicles world, I'm going to read it. The last book that I read in September was The Mental Load, a feminist comic by Emma. This comic was kind of like an aha moment for me. Reading through it, I just felt really seen and understood. Personally, I feel like I have a very heavy mental load, and this explained what the mental load even is in a really fun and engaging way, and I highly recommend anybody read this, especially if you're interested in the feminist movement. I think this is eye-opening and wonderful.